Welcome to Vitamin OC. I'm Joanna Weiss.
I'm Whitney Gomez. Every week we bring you your recommended dose of civics and civilization in Orange County. And today we are talking about what's happening right here in Huntington Beach, a community that has, for better or worse, become a microcosm of the national culture wars. And it's a place where debates about education, public safety, and free expression have all collided, and where one local leader has stood firm in the middle of it all, and we've got her here today.
Yeah, that leader is Gina Clayton-Tarvin. We're so happy to have her here with us today. She served on the Ocean View School District Board of Trustees since 2012 and has held nearly every leadership position there, including 5 terms as president. But Gina isn't your typical politician, which is one of the reasons we love her. She's a classroom teacher who still spends her days with 6th graders in Cerritos, bringing the same energy, empathy, and sense of purpose to her students that she brings to her public service. She stood up for students and families again and again, from calling out illegal surveillance cameras on school property to defending public libraries from censorship to holding local officials accountable for transparency. A fearless advocate and lifelong educator, we're thrilled to welcome Gina Clayton-Tarvin to Vitamin OC. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joanna and Whitney. Oh my gosh, thanks for having me on with you today. It's an honor.
Well, we're so glad you're here. Thanks for making the time. So, if we could start with your journey. So, you've spent nearly 3 decades in the classroom and more than a decade on the school board. What first drew you to education, and what motivated you to step away a little bit from education into the often turbulent world of local politics?
Wow, that's a loaded question. So I was in college. I was going to Cal State Long Beach for my undergraduate in anthropology, and I decided to go back for anthropology, but a master's. And so while I was going to school for an applied anthropology master's, I decided to go to work in the ABC Unified School District as a substitute. And I worked K to 12. I mean, I worked everything from kindergarten all the way to the teen mother program. I taught high school, I taught middle school, all different elementary grades. And I kind of landed at a middle school in Hawaiian Gardens. I don't know if you're familiar with Hawaiian Gardens, a little tiny city in southeast LA County that kind of has a reputation for being a little tough. It's been known to be the crossing point for black tar heroin getting into LA County from Tijuana and coming through San Diego County and Orange County. It's the stopover. There's a lot of gang activity, and it's a rough neighborhood for children to grow up in. And I started there working as a long-term substitute. And then at the end of the school year, the principal said, "Hey, do you think you want to teach at our school?" So I taught, I got hired. I was 24 years old. I got hired teaching Algebra 1 for high school credit, pre-algebra, and life science. And it began my journey of being a teacher in the public school system. And the first year into teaching, I was asked by then union rep Ken Denman. He said to me, "Gina, I've been the union rep for years. I'd like for you to be the union rep at our school site." And I said, "Ken, I'm a brand new teacher. I'm in my first year and I'm not tenured. And like, this is like a suicide mission for any teacher. You can't do that." And he's like, "No, honestly, it'll help you to protect yourself because you'll know you'll know your rights, you'll know the contract." And he goes, "Please." So I ran and I won and I became the union rep like my first year teaching. And that led to me being at the rep council meetings, and the vice president of the union said to me, "Hey, I see that you're really interested and involved, and I know your dad's in a labor union." My dad was a pilot at United Airlines, so he was in ALPA, the Airline Pilots Association. My grandmother was a school bus driver in New Jersey, so she was a union member. My uncle was in United Plumbers 1 in New York City and Brooklyn. So I come from a union family. And so, yeah, I said, "Okay, I'm glad to be here as a rep." And she goes, "No, I want you to run for recording secretary of the union." And I was like, wow, okay, recording secretary is huge. I ran and I won. I then became the vice president of middle schools. I became the vice president at large, and it turned into 12 years of being on the union executive board. And that's the AF Union, American Federation of Teachers. So it's called ABCFT. We're Local 2317, and we're part of the AFL-CIO. And that led me to be part of the LA County Federation of Labor Caucus. It just led me into so many different directions. Now I work in Cerritos and I teach 6th grade in the GATE program. My son attended First Golden View. I went to his first grade parent-teacher conference after we did our conference, and she talked about his reading levels and his math and everything. And she said, "You know, I hear you're a leader in your teachers union in LA County." And I said, "Yes, I am." She goes, "Well, we have a really bad school board. Did you hear that they want to raise class sizes from 20 to 1 to 29 to 1?" And I said, "What?" Because, it was our governor at the time, Jerry Brown's initiative to have 20 to 1 for K to 3. And that was wonderful because high class sizes are really a problem in California. They truly are. And it's because there's not enough teachers and there's a lot of kids and it's very difficult. And so I said to her, "Why are they making this decision? Governor Brown is still funding the initiative, so why is this happening?" She said, "They're just very anti-education. They hate teachers. They don't like our union. They don't want to work with us." And she said, "Would you mind coming to the school board meeting and just speaking out, like as a parent and as a teacher?" So I went to the meeting and I got to the mic and I said, "Why are you doing this? You're going to hurt a whole generation of children." And I said, "This doesn't even make sense. Why 29 to 1? When you make collective learning groups in classrooms, it should be with even numbers. That's why class contract maximums are always either a 26 or a 28 or, 30, 32. You very rarely have an odd number." And I said, "And even worse, it's a prime number. You can't even make collective groups out of 29. So it's like, that's me as a math teacher talking. Everyone started laughing and yay. And I said, "This isn't right. This isn't right." And you know what? I think that in November, we're going to see you at the ballot box. You are being put on warning here. We will see you and we're going to take you out." And I just turned my back and I walked right out the door to go home to my baby. I just said, "I'm out." The next day, and there were still in the room, though, in the boardroom, there were about 300 people, standing room only. It was wild in there. People cheering, "Oh, yeah. And I left. And the next day, I got a call from my neighbor. And he said, "My daughter teaches in the district and she's one of the union reps. And the union leader of all three of the districts, Huntington Beach Union High School District, Huntington Beach City District, and the Ocean View School District. She runs all three unions' labor negotiations. Her name's Monica Mora. She's a CTA advocate." He said, "She wants to talk to you." And I said, "About?" I'm not really clear. He said, "I don't know. She just wants to talk to you. Can I give her your phone number?" And I said, "Sure." And she called me and she said, "Wow, you're phenomenal last night at the board meeting. We would like for you to run." And I go, "Just like that? You just going to call a random stranger and ask if I want to run?" She said, "Yes, we want you to run for the school board." And I said, "Well, what do you guys have to support candidates? It's tough running." And I knew this because my father had run for state assembly. My mother had run for state assembly. They're both Republicans. My father, back in the 70s, had served on the tax appeals board in San Diego. My mom was the president of the San Diego County Republican Women. So I grew up in a very political family. Okay. And I knew that it took more than just the will. It's the will, but it's also the way. And the way that you get to elected office is really quite difficult in the United States of America because it requires a tremendous amount of capital, of money. And I talked to my father about it after I hung up with Monica because I said, "I need to talk to my dad. He's really my political kind of guide, and I need to talk to him about what is really necessary here." And my father was very blunt about it. He said, "Gina, teachers unions are quite powerful. And they're powerful to do good. They're there to really protect the children. That's their special interest. So if they're interested in having a teacher who they know will protect children on the board, they have to talk to you about what they're offering." And what that meant was, do they have volunteers? Do they have boots on the ground who are going to knock on doors, who are going to make those calls, who are going to write postcards? Do they have the money to do mailers? Are they going to be able to do text messaging? And he said, "There's 2 seats up for election, but I don't like that. I don't like running in slates." He said, "Slates are never good." He said, "You tell them that you want to just run alone and you need them to bullet vote you in. They're going to just focus on you because once you get elected, you can help to flip the rest of the seats." And that's exactly what I asked the teachers. They're called the Ocean View Teachers Association through CTA. What I asked them to do, I said, "These are the conditions that I will run in. Ladies, the Ocean View teachers," I said, "I need your help." And they were like, "We're in, we're all in." And I ran and I won and I took out the president of the school board, a very notorious right-wing libertarian named Norm Westwell. He is famous. His nickname is Firecracker because he used to always talk about legalizing fireworks. Anyway, he was like very pro-gun and he's a notorious character in Huntington Beach. Run for city council numerous times. Well, I took out Firecracker. So anyone from Huntington Beach that's going to watch this, they'll laugh because they'll go, "Oh my God, Firecracker," And so, yeah, it was a big episode. And I knocked on hundreds of doors, if not like 1,000 doors, with my baby in the carriage, my other guy holding my hand, and the teachers and I, and we were just roving for months. And I talked to so many voters and so many parents, and they're like, "You're one of us. We want a school board that has parents on it." And to this day, I still have a kid in the district because now I have a younger son named Max, and he's 13 years old. So I started as a parent in Ocean View in 2010, and it's now almost 2026, and I'm still a parent in the Ocean View School District. So that's kind of how I got into politics.
Well, that's incredible. I can completely see why people would want to elect you. And I can completely see you walking in, knocking the socks off the room, and them saying, "She just walked out of here." Oh, that's a great story. Okay, talk to us about the next chapter when you became a leader on the school board and how your experience in the classroom, in the Gates program, in bilingual education, how that impacted your leadership approach.
Thank you for that question. You know, what's really interesting is when I first got on the board, I was alone. I was the lone Democrat. They were all Republicans, and I used to call them my Republicans because we really did get along for the most part, but their ideas of what were important for students were very different from mine, and they weren't supportive of teachers and of classified staff, of bus drivers, of the principals. They just weren't labor friendly, except for one, actually. And you may have heard of him. His name is John Briscoe. John was one of the most right-leaning guys in Orange County, and he's a longtime elected official, 16 years on the school board, and he was so supportive of children. And John and I allied. Gina Clayton-Tarvin, strong Democrat, and John Briscoe, member of the Orange County Central Committee of Republicans, very, very well-known Republican. And we got together and allied on a lot of things. We started modernizing the front offices and bathrooms and facilities, not the whole school site, but part of the schools. We had these contractors that were awful. And John and I ended up realizing, because some parents and teachers contacted us, they were doing asbestos abatement with humans in the building. Kids in the building, volunteers, teachers, everybody in the building. And all they were doing was hanging up like these little plastic sheets, and there's guys walking around in spacesuit, asbestos abatement spacesuits, like looking like this, and then there's kids sitting at desks. And I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And I just blew the whistle, and John really blew the whistle, and we just blew this wide open. They were literally abating asbestos with children in the buildings. We ended up finding out that there were high levels above federal regulation levels in some of the school sites. And I said, no, we're done here. They did it in multiple school sites. After we blew this whistle, the teachers union and a parent coalition and a whole bunch of people got together, and they said, we've got to get this board out of here. These people are making really bad decisions. And they were the 3 board members at the time that were really not making great choices for children. And then the election came literally like 2 months later, and they were flipped out of office. And that changed the entire trajectory of the board. I became the board president 1 month later. And I proceeded to be the board president 3 years in a row. No one's ever done that in Orange County in the history of school boards. And then finally, I've been the board president 5 times out of the 13 years I've been on the board. I've been the vice president multiple times, the clerk of the board. I'm the clerk currently. That was a pivotal point. That lack of care that the district showed for the children, exposing them to asbestos. And by the way, my son was one of the kids in the school. So we literally shut the schools. We bused kids to Buena Park. We rented whole schools in other school districts, and we bused the children. And we moved 3,000 kids in a matter of a week. We pivoted, remember how what happened during the pandemic? Well, we had already had, unfortunately, experience in learning how to move children out. Fast forwarding to 2020, when the pandemic hit in Ocean View, we had a whole system in place. We knew what to do. We got everybody going. We had kids ready to go almost instantly because of that unfortunate experience in the past of having to move children when a big crisis occurred, really.
Well, we had another crisis recently in the Oakview School District, and you recently called out the city of Huntington Beach for installing a surveillance camera on district property in Oakview without permission. You called it racial profiling and a violation of the student rights. Can you walk us through what happened and what it revealed about local government in Huntington Beach?
Yeah. I mean, hey, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about local government in Huntington Beach. Let's just call it what it is. We have 7 bigots running our local city government. There's no other way. I'm not going to mince words. They are anti everybody, okay? Who aren't them or that doesn't, agree with them. If you're not a Republican, if you're not a conservative, if you're not MAGA, God forbid that you be brown or black or you be LGBTQ or you're something that they don't agree with, you get profiled, you get discriminated against. And so what happened in Oakview, one of our schools in the Ocean View School District, which is literally one of the most densely populated communities in Orange County. That is true per county statistics. Oakview is literally 1 square mile. Okay. And there's 10,000 people living there. And our school is the heart of that community. But on the other side of the street is the Republic trash dump. Ever heard of the Rainbow Trash episode that the school district sued Rainbow Republic? And that turned into like a $28 million litigation that we prevailed on, thank God. And the children were saved from being, polluted and poisoned. So this community has been affected. The Oakview community has been discriminated against, has been the subject of environmental racism. Because in your community, would an open trash dump be functioning in your community? No. Would it be functioning in the harbor of Huntington Beach? Would it be in my neighborhood? Would there be an open transfer station with massive amounts of, uncovered raw garbage? So this community has been discriminated against and has been abused for years. So the latest episode is this. We had Mark Bixby, if you're familiar with him, he runs the Sentinel page on Facebook. He's called HB Sentinel. Mark happens to be a former planning commissioner of Huntington Beach, and he's currently the chair of the Ocean View School District's Measure Our Bond Oversight Committee. Mark is a longtime public servant and a guy who understands a lot, especially about law and about keeping elected officials honest and in check. Mark goes through the agendas every time the city council has a meeting. And what he does is he looks for anomalies, like what is this agenda item? What is this? There wasn't any debate, and they just literally slid these surveillance cameras right through. So when Mark sounded that bell, he sounded the alarm. Of course, I went, wait a minute. And he put up a map and he said, these are the locations that these cameras are going to be at. And I went, what? And I looked closely at the map and I realized that one of them was right on the Ocean View School District's property. So what's interesting about OVSD, and most school districts, this is not true. We not only own the school properties, which are not city agencies at all. Schools are state agencies run through local districts that have local governance bodies, which are school boards. And we are one of the few school districts in Orange County or in California in general that owns the streets around many of the schools. So around Oakview, by the preschool, there's a street called Belcedo Lane. We own the entire street. The taxpayers of the Ocean View School District own the street, not the city. Now, most streets are owned by the city or even some by the county, right? In unincorporated county areas. No. Around many schools in the Ocean View School District, it's owned by the district themselves. So what they did was they took one of their surveillance cameras. It's AI-driven surveillance. See where I'm going with this? I'm sure you can extrapolate forward, but I will get there. What they did was they took the camera and they put it on a pole, a city light pole that we had given them permission to put the city light pole years ago, apparently, but only verbally. It wasn't something that was we didn't even have an easement with them, apparently. They claimed they had the permission to put the light pole. Okay, let's say that were true. We didn't even have any kind of documentation that they were allowed to do anything there. Didn't matter. They went out there and they placed an AI that generates AI looking at people's faces when people go by, scanning faces. Yeah. And they put it on, wild, right? And they put it on a post on the Ocean View School District's property. And we said, no, you're not. It was literally hanging above the playground of the preschool, of the Oakview preschool. And we were quiet at first. I said, look, we'd have to look into this. We don't want to go off half, cocked. We want to make sure that we have all the proper information. We had our CBO, our business official, the assistant superintendent, call over to the city and find out what is going on here. Do you think you have permission to do this? Do you realize you don't even have an easement with us? No. And frankly, you didn't have our permission to do this. So we want you to take it down. And the city responded initially with, well, we're going to look into it. We'll let you know. And we're like, no, we'll let you know that we'll have to start litigation, frankly, because our board can tend to be litigious. We have been in the past. When it comes to student safety and when it comes to protecting our parents who are part of the Ocean View family, the parents of the students, the answer is no. When you try to damage parents and students, you're done with the Ocean View School District. So we said, take it down. They took it down, never said a word about it, came back, and it was gone. In the meantime, I had to go over and point it out and say, look at that. What is that doing here? And so on. You know what? They deserve the embarrassment. I've talked to several reporters since then from the New Yorker, from Bloomberg magazine, and one of the reporters believes that this is a part of a national movement by the federal government to do national face scanning and national profiling for ICE.
Oh my gosh. Video really struck a nerve. It was a very, very powerful video. And when you said, you don't do this in other neighborhoods, why are you doing it here? I think that really resonated with people.
Yeah, I mean, I really believe that. They wouldn't have done that in my neighborhood. It's obvious what they're doing. They're only putting up these cameras in neighborhoods where immigrants live. Do they think we're stupid? Well, we're not. Huntington Beach residents are not stupid. And I would like to say this. Most residents in Huntington Beach are excellent, good people. They care. They care about the community. They don't want to see this kind of stuff. So when that video did come out, everybody sided with me. Why? Because it's the right thing to do, to side with your neighbors, to be on your neighbor's side.
Well, you were also right about the library. So let's talk a little bit about measures A and B, which Ocean View School District voted to support. Why was that so important? And what role do you think school districts play in defending freedom of speech, intellectual freedom, and the like?
Yeah, was that some fight? I'll tell you what, that was nothing more than political kabuki theater by our city council, specifically former Mayor Gracie Vandermark, who has a very, very bad reputation. Very bad. She's a known white supremacist adjacent, neo-Nazi adjacent, runs around with Proud Boys and the RAM Rise Against movement, all these guys that have been jailed for domestic disturbances, domestic attacks on our Capitol on January 6th. This woman is knee deep in garbage, okay? And she's literally a Holocaust denier. And she's now sitting on the city council of Huntington Beach. So one of her big hoorays was, oh, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say that there's porn in the library. Well, we all know that's not true. We all know that she was just targeting those who she's been targeting for years, which is your LGBT community, saying that anything that had to do with puberty or with LGBTQ or anything that was an educational book for teenagers was supposedly in the children's section, which it was not. Okay. And she went on a tirade just saying that the librarians are groomers and perverts. She's talking about mainly women, these librarians who are highly educated with masters and PhDs in library science. And here we have Gracie Vandermark, high school dropout and neo-Nazi adjacent character, telling the librarians what is moral and what is not, what is pornography and what is not. And actually, as you know, the Miller test tells us it's a very strict legal framework to look at what is truly obscene, what is pornographic. Okay, so they decide that they're going to go on this rampage, and she gets Chad Williams, the useful fool, in my opinion. They make him the face of it, and he starts a campaign called, Save the Children A, No on A and B with Chad Williams. Okay, because when you're an elected official and you get behind a ballot measure, you have to put your name. That's FPPC law. So Chad gets himself in the mix with this, and they use Chad, frankly, but he wanted to be used. They said to Chad Williams, you should put up these signs around every elementary and middle school and high school in Huntington Beach that said porn, protect our children from porn, PORN, in giant letters, the size of 4 feet high, the size of a child, outside of our school sites, my kid's school site, their kid's school site, my neighbors, all of our children were exposed every day to giant porn signs. Okay? Guess what? He shot himself in the foot with that one. The community went boom. They went ballistic on him. Former people that said, oh, I love Chad. Oh, he's a Navy SEAL. I'm going to vote for him. He knows, I love conservatism. These people literally said, this is not conservatism. This is not protection of children. And you are a creep, Chad Williams. Okay, you're a creep. And I became the person on the other side of the argument. I became the person who was giving out the message to the community from a school board member's perspective, because school board members, we are the guardians of children. When they're on our campuses, we're literally in loco parentis. Teachers are in loco parentis. School officials are the local parent, are the guardian of children, not you, Chad Williams, not you who's damaging children. You don't want children to see porn, yet you advertise giant porn signs. Well, now guess what? Many children have phones. Many children got on their phones and Googled porn. Okay. What do you think they saw? Actual porn. Okay. And you know what? Many parents came to me and said, Gina, you've got to stop this. You got to get those things off the fences and off the walls. And I said, well, they're city walls, they're city fences. I cannot do that. The city would have to do that. Well, guess what? The city administrator said, it's free speech. Oh, we can't take it down. It's free speech. They played the it's free speech. Okay, yes, maybe it is free speech, but it's disruptive. And it's kind of like going into a movie theater and screaming fire. It ceases to be free speech when you're causing a literal chaotic situation in the city. What did I do? I decided I was going to make sure that Chad didn't abuse the children anymore. So I happen to be a mandated reporter. I'm a teacher in the state of California. I'm legally mandated to contact the police and other law enforcement agents and CPS and let them know that Chad Williams says there's porn in the public library. Chad said it, and he's in charge of the library. Gracie said it, she's in charge of the library. They all said it. They said it. All 7 of them, they said there's porn. Butch Twining, Don Kennedy, they all said it. Okay, well, if you said it now, you're the ones running the library. I guess you're allowing it. I guess you're the purveyors of porn. That's who's the purveyors of porn. You. So what did I do? I called CPS. What did I do? I called Orange County District Attorney Todd Spitzer. What did I do? I called the FBI. What did I do? I called Huntington Beach PD. And I made reports of all of this and I demanded investigation. I said, they say there's porn. Now you go find it. If apparently there's porn, please somebody show me that there's porn. Because if it's true, my own child was in that library. My child's been exposed to porn. Well, you're abusing my child then. Magically, not one of those law enforcement agencies came back to me and said, Gina Clayton-Tarvin, we found the porn. Guess what? Because there wasn't any porn, okay? Because they're all liars and manipulators, and they got caught doing it. And so I took myself to the city council meeting, and I got on the microphone, and I explained it just like that. And then I read the letter from the chief of police, Eric Parra, who's a good guy. Eric Parra is a good guy, and he wrote a letter to the librarians just 6 months or 8 months before that, and he said, dear librarians, you are professionals. I appreciate you. I do not believe the rhetoric of some of the residents in Huntington Beach and calling you names. You are professionals, and I trust your judgment. Signed, Eric Parra. And I went and I read that at the microphone. And you know what? The entire auditorium in the library where they were holding the meeting erupted in cheers because they knew that these people were lying all along. And you should have seen all their guilty faces sitting up there, all 7 of them, when they got called out for their lies. And the chief of police was there. He was there at the top of the theater. And when I walked out, and he literally high-fived me. He said,
That's amazing.
yeah, it was like, your lies end here today. It was
So
great.
you took on City Hall another time and won. The city tried to hide the cost of the air show settlement, and your lawsuit forced the release of public records, and a judge ordered the city to pay your attorneys more than $180,000 in attorney's fees. And can you tell us about what the transparency in that case is so important to you and what residents should take away about how that unfolded?
Yeah, it's real simple. It's called the California Records Act, California Public Records Act, CPRA. And all of us who are elected officials, all government agencies, and those can be appointed officials, we're all subject to having our records be open to the public. And in California, it's like a Freedom of Information Act, like the federal government law. And all public records are just that, they're public. And when I had asked for the settlement agreement, I was denied by then city attorney Michael Gates. So he denied that. He violated the law and he would not give me the document. So I took him to court, and I was represented by several attorneys in Orange County who took the case on pro bono. I thank them greatly. Gregory Pleasance led that effort, and Greg argued, that this is truly a public record. Hey, you guys made a deal. You signed it and you signed a third party. So it's not attorney-client privilege anymore, which is what Michael Gates had tried to argue in court. And I'll tell you what, that judge, Jonathan Fish, he really took Gates to task in that courtroom. He was like, this is lawyering 101. He was like, Judge Fish made me laugh that day because he just said, he goes in, I teach law classes over, I think he said Chapman. He said, you should know this. Like, this is basic California law. So really what came out of it, we saw that the city council was lying to us. Surprise, shocker, because that's unfortunately what they've been doing too much of. And we saw the big giveaway that they gave to their political contributor and, buddy Kevin Elliott, who runs the air show. They gave him a sweetheart deal. They gave him an evergreen deal that never ends, just keeps going and going and going. And so what's the moral to that story? This is America. Records are public. Nothing is secret. We're not dealing with backroom deals. If you want to work, you want to be a voice of the people, you have to be honest. And I am proud to say that every time I've received a CPRA request, I have turned over all my documents. I have nothing to hide. When you're honest and you're doing the right thing for your taxpayers, when you're a responsible fiduciary, you don't mind turning over your records. And so I hope the city of Huntington Beach council members have learned a real hard lesson from that one.
Gina, you've taken a good amount of abuse from the Huntington Beach City Council members. I want to give you a chance to respond and defend yourself right now if you would like to.
Yeah, I would just say act honorably. Act as your name is written. Any elected official is called honorable. There's your honorific. Act honorably. So they can continue, if they wish, because it's free speech, to attack me, to make up lies about me, to fabricate stories, or to criticize me. That's all free speech too. But be prepared for me to not only rebut you, but for me to expose who you are. I think one of the things that we see too often, and now I'm going to get a little partisan, okay? And I want to make this disclaimer though ahead of time. I was a registered Republican for years when it was the party of Lincoln, when the Republican Party was led with moral forwardness, in my opinion. And they've gone astray, okay? And when I changed my party back in 2000, I became a Democrat. And I realized that I align with those values. One of the values, though, that Democrats, I think, hold dear is being kind to each other, being nice to each other, the way we would want to raise our children or teach children in school to be kind to each other, be nice. And I was raised a Christian, although one of my grandparents is Jewish. And I will say this, Jesus said, turn the other cheek. He did. And I think most Democrats who are, folks who believe that you should be kind to each other or turn the other cheek, I think they're realizing now that's not the Christianity of the current Republican Party or the MAGA Party, let's call them that. I don't believe they're acting like true Christians, because if they were, they wouldn't be doing what they're doing. They wouldn't be stripping food from residents, healthcare from residents. They wouldn't be kidnapping people in the street just because of the color of their skin, like ICE is doing. Bottom line is, I'm a different kind of Democrat. I'm a kind of Democrat that's going to show you that you're not going to abuse the people I represent. And if that has to hurt your feelings, I'm sorry that hurts your feelings. It's time for Democrats to really, in my opinion, take back ownership of, we are the party of morality and American values. That's exactly what we are. So I hope that my political opponents are not offended by what I say, because what I say is actually the truth. Now, what they can do, besides badgering me or calling me names or attacking me or defaming me, or my children, they do that too. What they can do is they can see themselves to the ballot box and they can try to unseat me. I'm in my 4th term, so if I decide to run again, I haven't made up my mind, but if I do, they can see me at the ballot box and they can do things the American way by voting.
Gina, I can't let us close this without talking to you about the conversation that we had almost a year ago when I was thinking about running for state senate. And I was calling a bunch of Democrats trying to get the endorsement of the party. And you said to me, can I speak frankly? And I said, yeah, I grew up in New Jersey. I'm okay with you being direct. You're like, oh, I can speak directly. And you unleashed on me about Tony Strickland, who now is in the seat. And if you'd like to share with our listeners a little bit about your opinion about Tony, I'd love to hear that again.
Sure. And I was so glad when you called me. Listen, Whitney, I thought you were such a kind and nice person. You had the best intentions. And I wanted to make sure that you knew what you were going into with your eyes wide open and understanding who your opponent would become in Tony Strickland. Tony Strickland is a longtime seasoned politician that doesn't care about anything except for winning. He will do anything to prevail, including defaming you, destroying your name, attacking you. Is it just okay in our country to fabricate stories about people that aren't true? Put them out there? No, it's not okay. This is part of the breakdown of the moral fabric of America that's occurring right now. Alternate facts, fake news, all these things that we've heard about. This is what is destroying our civil discourse in this country. And I didn't want you to be swept up into that and to have your children attacked. I know you have kids. I didn't want to see that happen to you because I know what Tony's like. In the election for city council, when I ran against Tony in 2022, they put out 10 hit pieces on me. 10 attacked me multiple times, lying about me. My point is that I know what Tony Strickland's capable of, and I just wish he wasn't like that. My only hope for Mr. Strickland is that he can correct himself and that he can act in an appropriate manner and he can represent all of his constituents. That's my hope for Mr. Strickland. And I hold out hope that he will do that. And I know Joanna, I helped when she ran. I endorsed Joanna. So I'm really happy that you ladies have given me the opportunity to speak to you today. I support you both. And
Thank you.
I look forward to what you both do in the future.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for your integrity, for your transparency, your commitment to truth. And to our listeners, you can find links to learn more about the Ocean View School District and Gina Clayton-Tarvin's work in our show notes.
Thank you
Great.
for joining us for your recommended dose of civics and civilization in Orange County. And Gina, you are a powerhouse. So nice to meet you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
So good to see you. And to our viewers, we'll see you next time.